Sorry. We're going to go into executive session. We won't. We'll go in.
I'm glad you're.
I don't know if that's the right adjective. Pour us out.
All right, so when you start out by indicating you would have a specific
Thank you.
Well, we'll make the motion and then.
Sorry, I was.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't. I didn't know.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh.
Do you have other public comments? Yeah, I think there's some about the fundraising stuff too. But that'll go with that one. So she will be first. Yes. I just said it'll be in the January 22nd agenda.
Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. We're going to return. I'll call the board back from our break. And our first item on our agenda is our special recognition of Lawrence High School's The Budget, recipients of the National Scholastic Press Association Pacemaker Award. And we have Matt Brungart, principal of Lawrence High School, and Barb Tholen, journalism teacher from Lawrence High School, to present.
Good evening. 8 years ago, I hired Barb Tholen, and when I hired her, she was in industry. And so a lot of career and tech ed teachers we find come from industry. And I think the reason I wanted to mention that we hired Barb from that, she worked for the Associated Press, I believe, when I hired her, is that she runs her journalism program just like a newsroom. And so I think that probably goes a long ways in why she got this award tonight. So without that, I'm going to turn it over to Barb and let her talk a little bit about the award and the students.
And kids, do you guys want, journalists, do you want to come up here and everyone can stare at you and be in awe of your, okay. So yeah, I was a reporter, so thank you. My previous job was a reporter for about 10 years. I spent a lot of nights covering meetings like this, probably hundreds of these school board meetings, and that's not an exaggeration. So I know you guys aren't here for the glory or the money, and I also know how important your job is to the success of the school district, and thank you for taking on that job. So I teach the best subject at the best high school to the best students. These are kids who will text me during the summer break because there's a story they want to cover, and they need cameras, or they'll come in on weekends, and not like short days on weekends, like long weekend days. They work long days in the summer at journalism workshops, and they take a lot of pride and ownership in what they do. So I'm very lucky. I believe what they do is important. I believe journalism is important. And this is one of those kind of unique moments, I think, in the world where I feel like I need to say why I think journalism is important, and why these student journalists are so important. At its best, journalism shines a light in dark places. That sunlight, I think, tends to hold people with power accountable. And it helps empower those who don't have power. It's important to note that my students determine the content of their publications. That's certainly how journalism should work. And I believe it's how journalism education should work. When students make meaningful decisions about content, they take ownership of their publications. They enjoy the praise, and, as I'll tell you, they get to respond to the criticisms. They tell stories that matter to their audience. And they tell stories that I think challenge the adults who work with them every day to do better. I know they have challenged me over the years, and I know I'm better for it. They have worked relentlessly to tell the Lawrence High School story, and I'm so pleased that they were honored as a 2017 newspaper pacemaker winner. We were just one of 25 schools across the entire country to receive that honor, and it's really like, honestly, as good as you can do for a student publication, without any exaggeration there. So thank you for honoring these students today, and these are my editors. There's a bunch more, but you know, it's December and there are finals next week, and that's kind of scary. So I just want to introduce you to a few of my students here. Riley German Martinez is our co-copy chief this year, and they are graduating semester, so we're going to really miss them. And this is Kansas Gidler, who was editor-in-chief of the newspaper last year and is on a gap year, so it's lucky that we have her around. And this is William Yannick, who is our online co-editor, along with Anahita, who can totally come up closer if you want to. Anahita Hurt is our other online co-editor. And then I have Gary Schmidt, who's co-editor of the newspaper this year, which, by the way, they also got second place Best of Show for the newspaper this year, which was really exciting at that competition. And then Trey Hulse, who's one of our co-sports editors. So these are amazing kids, and thank you so much.
Congratulations. 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 Good to see you again. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, and for all the school board members, we have copies of all the newspapers from last year.
Oh, lovely. So nice.
You know, if you need like this holiday, right?
Thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you. It's a great award and a great honor. And we appreciate the opportunity to get to see your great work, so thank you. Our next item is the report of the board president, and I have a couple of things to share tonight. I wanted to start off by first addressing some of the press coverage this past week of the City Commission's decision regarding, preliminary decision regarding location of their proposed police facility, across the street from Free State High School. We just wanted to share that I spoke up about the process and the need for the school district input because based on inputs that I have heard over the past several years, I've heard concerns expressed from staff and families about that area as a potential location. So given those inputs, I felt that it was important for the board and the district to have a very solid understanding of what exactly the city's plans are for the property, and also for us to be able to share concerns that we may have about those plans in a meaningful way. As the Journal World reported on Tuesday, the site selection decision that was made on, I guess it was the Journal World report on Wednesday, the site selection decision that was made on Tuesday's meeting will now have to go through a rezoning process. So it is my understanding that if we would like to give input, we will have an opportunity to do that as that plan goes through the process of the Planning Commission and then to the City Commission for that rezoning. So I'm going to work with Dr. Stubblefield and board leadership to find out from the city how they want us to provide input and how we can do that in this case, but also in future discussions around planning issues that may or have an impact on our school facilities. And if members of our school community have concerns or questions about this proposed project as it relates to the project's impact on our school building, please share those with the board or with district administration, and we will make those questions and concerns a part of our feedback and communications that we have with the city. Just wanted to share that I had an opportunity to do an interview with a reporter from KJHK at KU on the upcoming legislative session and the legislature's potential response to the Supreme Court's Gannon decision on school funding. The special legislative committee that is tasked with looking at potential legislative responses had its first meeting on December 4th, And I encourage the board members and all of the members of our school communities to stay engaged in following those conversations as they develop. And last, I wanted to just thank our new board member, G.R. Gordon Ross, for attending the day-long Foundations of Boardmanship training in Wichita on December 1st at the KASB Annual Convention. I was able to attend that training with G.R., and we both learned a lot that I think will help us improve as board members. And I want to say a very, very special thank you to Jessica Beeson. She traveled to Wichita last weekend to speak on my behalf at the convention for my candidacy for president-elect designee at KASB. Jessica gave my nominating speech, and I'm so very grateful to her for that support. That was a big commitment, and I just wanted to tell her how touched I was by her words and that she came to provide that support for me. I'm really excited to report that I was elected. It was not a contested election, so that was kind of a given at that point, but I was still pretty nervous. And I'm really excited to be a part of their leadership team at KASB. That will begin July 1st, 2018. When I become KASB president in July 2019, I learned this weekend that I will be the second board member from Lawrence to have served in that role. And the first was a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Houston, who served as the KASB president from 1942 to 1947. So I'm excited to represent Lawrence once again in that capacity. So that's all I have for this evening. So we'll move on to the report of the superintendent.
Good evening. I have a few things here. Again, congratulations to Shannon for her election as the KSB President-elect designee. Next, the recommendation from the public meeting about the renaming of South Middle School will come back to the board on January 22nd, so it will be on the agenda for the second January meeting. We're proud of Free State High School for earning a $3,000 West Star grant to support studying the science behind clean energy and designing a 1,000-watt wind turbine. Congratulations to Barbara Williams, Liberty Memorial Central Middle School Assistant Principal, for earning the renewal of her National Board Certification in English Language Arts, Adolescents, and Young Adult Literature. The district last week presented its Fall Semester Class Act Award to Joanne Devon, Sunset Hill Elementary Secretary. This award honors outstanding classified staff like Ms. Devon, who supports staff and school families. Our Nutrition and Wellness Department has been celebrating its receipt of several grants recently, including a $25,000 Topeka Community Foundation grant to increase educational opportunities for form-to-school garden coordinators and nutrition and wellness staff, a $10,000 Live Well Lawrence grant to expand school garden initiatives at Lawrence College and Career Center, Pinckney and Deerfield, and a $15,000 grant to add bicycle fleets to both high school physical education departments, add 2 indoor bike trainers, which convert bicycles to stationary bikes at each elementary school, and purchase accessories for special education, adapted physical education, triathlon training. The board lunch tomorrow is at noon at Quell Run. Families of children in grades 4 through 12 are invited tomorrow to attend a science and engineering fair information night here at the district office at 6:00 p.m. This is an opportunity to learn how your child can enter a science fair, including fairs in the Kansas State Fair. Including regional fairs and the Kansas State Fair. The board invites the public to attend a community conversation from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Thursday, December 14th at the Lawrence Public Library Auditorium to discuss board goals and student achievement and successes. I also want to remind everyone that our winter break is December 22nd through January 3rd. Pre-K through 12 classes will resume on January 4th. We wish all of our staff, school families, a happy holiday season. I also have a special recognition tonight. While the board has a special session planned December 18th to screen applicants as part of the superintendent search, this is the last regular meeting for the school board this year. It is also our final regular meeting for Marcel Harmon and Vanessa Sanborn. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Marcel and Vanessa for their outstanding board service. We first became acquainted with Marcel and his wife Michelle through his tremendous volunteer support of Woodlawn Elementary School. The board appointed Marcel in 2014 to fill the remainder of Adina Morris's term. Marcel then campaigned and was elected to a 2-year term in 2015. He served as the board's vice president in 2015-16 and as the president in 2016-17. With his background in architecture, engineering, and anthropology, Marcel has been a valuable asset to the facilities planning process. His professional experience includes consulting with the school districts and institutions of higher education. So we have been truly fortunate to benefit from having his lens on our master facility planning process, and always with an eye towards sustainable practices. He has served on a variety of committees, perhaps most notably the Facility Planning Committee, Educate Lawrence, and Horizon 2020. Marcel also was actively involved in the successful campaign for the 2015 LOB election and the 2017 bond referendum. Also an outstanding supporter of Woodlawn Elementary School, Vanessa began her service on the school board in 2009. She has twice led the board as vice president in 2011 and 2014, and as president in 2012 and 2015. With her master's in social work, Vanessa also has brought a valuable perspective to the board, especially in championing the implementation of the National Human Sexuality Standards and the rights of the LGBTQIA+ community. Vanessa has served with fidelity on a variety of committees, perhaps most notably the Policy Review Committee, Negotiations, and the Coordinated School Health Council. Vanessa and her husband Jack were both actively involved in the successful passage of the 2013 school bond issue and assisted with the 2015 LOB election and the 2017 bond referendum. We have enjoyed watching Vanessa's daughter, Amelia, grow up before our eyes as she often came along to committee meetings. On behalf of the 12,000 students and 2,000 employees of the Lawrence Public Schools, I thank both of you for your outstanding board service. We have a token of appreciation to present to you tonight during your final regular board meeting. So thank both of you.
While Anna is presenting you with your tokens of appreciation, I wanted to just say a couple of words. A special thank you to both of you, to Marcel for stepping up for our community and when our community and our board needed you to, being on the task force, applying to fill an unexpired term, running a campaign, and then letting Vanessa and I talk you into being board president and vice president and filling that role in our leadership track has been, we've all benefited greatly from that. It's been a very fortunate experience for me to be able to serve on the facilities committee with you, and I know that our planning and our process and the discussions that we've had have been greatly enriched by what you bring to the table in that regard. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I value the thoughtfulness, your insight, your attention to detail, and your focus on always helping us try to make the best decisions both for now and in the long term. So thank you. And Vanessa, I don't know what I'm going to do without you. And I've served with Vanessa on the policy committee since I joined the board in 2011. We have been on that journey together, and Vanessa has served our district with great distinction. She's been a strong advocate, always using her voice and her passion to bring a perspective to all of our discussions that really is about making sure we're doing the right thing for all students, and I have a great deal of respect for that, and I will miss working with you in that capacity. I will miss seeing Amelia. Our daughters have grown up together on this journey. I think that's a pretty remarkable thing and rather unusual, actually, for a school board to have that kind of experience, and so just wanted to tell you thank you and that your leadership will be greatly missed. And I think that if other board members have comments they wish to share, let's, Rick, I know you wanted to share something.
Sure. I don't have anything prepared, and I really could echo what Anna and Shannon said, but I do know your husband's name. So I just want to really thank both of you. It's been a pleasure to work with you. You're really thoughtful. Marcel did step up and become the president when we had an unusual situation, and that was really appreciated. And I think, Vanessa, you've been an exceptional board member, and I'm really going to miss your insight, your comments, and the fact that I can tease you about sports. So, Marcel does not tease me because he's a K-State fan, and I have nothing to stand on. So I appreciate that, too.
I echo everything that's been said. It's been a pleasure working with you both. So thank you for being not only good role models, but good co-board members.
I know we get one more opportunity to say goodbye because we have our special meeting this week, but I wanted to make sure, that we had a chance to recognize both of you in a regular board meeting where people would have an opportunity to know how much we appreciate your service. So thank you. All right.
Okay, yes, that's
Okay.
the end of my report.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Okay, the next item on our agenda is patron commentary, and we have three, but two of them relate to something that's on the agenda later, our fundraising policy. So the first one that we have for patron commentary, and if I mispronounce your last name, please correct me, Lisa Delsey? Okay, thank you. And if you would like to come to the podium. And I'm going to read our audience participation guidelines. USD 497 Board of Education appreciates patrons taking time to talk to us about our policies and procedures. We set aside this time during every meeting to hear from the public. This is your time to share your opinions, but we ask that you avoid making comments of a personal nature about any district employee or student, including the use of personal names. While you are not required to share your contact information, we ask that you do so in order to allow us to follow up with any specific concerns you have. In such cases, a board member, the superintendent, or another staff member may be in touch with you to refer your concerns to the appropriate administrator for investigation. At that time, we encourage you to share as many details relative to your concerns as you are willing to share. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes if possible, and thank you for sharing your thoughts about policies and procedures with the board.
Thank you. Good evening, school board members. My name is Lisa Delsey. I'm a mother. I'm a advocate. I'm everything for my children. I've come in these rooms before to advocate for students of color in regards to racial injustice that's, being seen, heard, dealt with within 497. But today I come to you with a bit of a very personal situation that's going on with my child who attends Free State. Bullying has almost become the norm there. Last week, my daughter was attacked twice.
Ms. Delsey, I'm going to pause you there because if you would like to share specific information about a student,
Sure.
we would ask that we could do that in executive session so that we can protect the privacy of the students or the students involved. So I have a motion. I'm going to make a motion to move to executive session to discuss matters affecting a student in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, with Anna Stubblefield and Lisa Delsey invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at 7:41 with possible action to follow.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, the board needs to invite one additional party to be present during the executive session. So I'm going to move that the Board of Education recess to executive session to discuss matters affecting a student in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, with Anna Stubblefield, Lisa Delsey, and Ashton McKnight invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at 7:45 with possible action to follow.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll start by juice off for my kids' employment. And so now she's looking forward. But she's now cross-trained in all three stores. And Chris said, once you're cross-trained, you must eat. But ask me what I think, and I'll tell you. Half their shift at night. It depends. I'll send you the girls' schedule this week. If you want to go by whatever store they're looking, I'll do that. But just tell her to go in. Emily was 16, Becca was 17.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. She had stuff.
Well, Becca started, no, 16, there was 16 that started. Emily, she was the second one. Emily, they were waiting for her to return at 16. Her job interview literally took 2 minutes. She walked in, she was scared spitless. She walked in and Chris said, when can you start? That literally was her job interview.
That I maybe met that.
That's who you met, yeah. But she was mad that she couldn't come to the meeting anyway when she was working. She's on the budget staff.
both went to the high school. Okay, I can finish with you. Well, I'll keep on your door. Oh, that's okay.
Because my, as you can imagine,
Like you said, finger wagging.
going on in my world, I told her I wasn't available. I'm not thinking about it. I tell my wife this all the time. No, there are no.
Maybe 25 years ago, when we were still friends, 25 years ago. Yeah. I work too hard.
Have this back and forth. And there's a lot of mistakes that they say. Correct. Want to hear clearly you want to tell somebody.
Let me check on sour cream.
Please, LPS, yes.
Correct, me too. Correct.
Yeah, but I ended up over just in case we had it. I'd rather take under $5 and stuff. I just wanted to see like, but I wasn't, so I ended up, yes. But I just think it's.
201.
Right. I see that's great. A difference. Or one of the.
The only thing we may would be orange. Mine have like 2 crackers.
You're welcome.
But okay, well,
They may not, but it's.
Okay, we've returned from our executive session. We don't have any action to take. I beg your indulgence for just a sec while I get logged back into to our agenda. Okay. Okay. That concludes our patron commentary, unless we've had any additional forms since. Okay. All right. So we'll move on. Our next item is board commentary. Board members have things they wish to share. Marcel?
So when Facilities Committee met last week, most of it really was just a kind of a preview of the presentation that you saw tonight. We also got a preview of the presentation you'll hear for the middle schools next January. Vanessa, I want to apologize. I don't know what the miscommunication was. We thought that you had seen some of this or were going to see it at some point, so relative to the locker rooms at Free State. But
I think it was an oversight. I was left off the email for the last task force meeting. So,
okay. So, but the good news is that the reason that we did it at this point at the end of SD phase is that there is time to make revisions and get feedback incorporated. Let's see, we also discussed, we got Kyle gave us a brief update on the wellness and sustainability aspects. It looks like, at least for Lawrence High, that it's fairly easy to get the basic level of well certification, silver, maybe even gold. They're still looking at the lead aspects of it, and we'll get back to Kyle here in the near future. And then in general, for the other schools, Free State and the middle schools, they will be incorporating the relevant aspects of WELL and LEAD for those projects, but the scope of those are too small to actually pursue certification. And then we got a preview of the capital outlay, which you guys will see next year, and I think that was pretty much it.
We're gonna have a presentation on the capital outlay plan after the new board members join the board after the first of the year, so get everybody kind of up to speed on where everything is with that. So, any other board commentary this evening?
I have one thing, and so a couple things actually. So first, I want to thank Marcel for his service, and I think we'll have a lot more fun on Monday nights going forward. Though I will definitely miss this volunteer commitment, and have really enjoyed getting to know all of you in 8.5 years of service. It's been a long time, and it's been a road of ups and downs with lots of various challenges and all of that. And so I don't have anything particularly poetic to reflect upon, though I will say that the reason Marcel is here is because he continually emailed me while I was a board member about all sorts of really good ideas that sounded very smart. And I'm like, I could continue passing this on to the people that have an impact, or you could just join us. And so beware, if you are considering pestering a board member for any reason, you do it too much and you get a seat. And so
There are consequences to your answers.
So thank you very much for actually doing that, because, the wisdom that comes, we have different lenses, very different lenses, and I appreciate that yours has impacted our district the way that it has. We have facilities that we can be really proud of, and obviously with more financial commitment, we could have done a lot more with sustainability and all of that, and so I'm looking for someone out there to continue carrying that torch to see that through, but I thank you a lot. And then, again, I know I alluded to it a minute during our pre-session workshop, but I just got back from the National Sexuality Conference in New Jersey, so I got to spend the last 4 days in a grody casino, which I don't know why they still do conferences in casinos, because being in a place where smoking is allowed indoors is completely weird and foreign. But there were certain sections that were smoke-free with very interesting and engaging material and content, and I could talk for hours about it, and I will spare you that. But I did want to tell one story that was particularly impactful from one of the presenters, one of the keynote speakers. Not sure if you've ever heard of S. Bear Bergman, but he is a trans activist and an artist and an author. I bought his book and luckily had 2 hours on the tarmac leaving Philly while we were having the snow scraped off of our plane to read it in full before I got home to my responsibilities as a mother. So that was nice. Very compelling and interesting stories. And the story that he told that was part of his presentation really talked about how, as a society, we often, when we come around people who are transgender or people who are gender nonconforming, and we think about it through a lens of this new thing, this super new thing that we really struggle with understanding because it's just so new and it just seems like it came out of nowhere, and how challenging it can be with the systems that we have and the structures that are in place where we see the world in this binary system, and this seems so foreign and so new and so hard to adjust to. But his story was really compelling because he talked about how this isn't a new concept. This isn't a new thing that people are experiencing. In fact, if we look at the indigenous people that lived on this land prior to colonization, it was very common for people to live within gender norms that were not binary. And that if we can look at it and view it, it's really important to kind of push back against that narrative that this is this brand new thing, but rather a natural order that is reasserting itself, right? And so he likened it to, you can take a meadow and you can pave over it. You can turn it into a parking lot. But if you don't constantly tend to that meadow and continually pave it over, then the natural order will reassert itself. And that's what we're seeing when it comes to the way that gender is reasserting itself in our society. The cracks are forming as we're not continually paving over and we're making room for people to exist exactly as they are. And I do think that that is a much more helpful narrative than I've ever heard before, and it really does help me personally to kind of see this issue as one that we need to make more room for. There's no benefit to continually paving over something that doesn't work for everyone, and so I'm just sharing that story because it was impactful for me, and it's my last opportunity to sit here. Not that I won't come here occasionally in the future, but okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Marcel?
So I will say that your perspective, like, we do have different perspectives, but I have learned a lot from yours over the years that I've known you, and I really appreciate that. And I have enjoyed serving with you and with everybody else here, and I will miss the people, that's for sure.
I miss them so much.
I know. It's one of the things that makes serving on our board something that is meaningful and really, we all commit a lot of time to it, but that part of it makes it special. So,
You know, and I do think, I'm sorry, I thought I was done.
this is your chance. Take advantage
Really,
of it.
I know, it's my last opportunity. No, Scott Morgan's last day on the board. Like, when I served on this board with Scott Morgan, we did not get along, and lots of people were privy to watching that whole thing, like, go down and on occasion. But, like, we really did become really good friends. And I do think it is really important to recognize that even though we have different worldviews and we come, like, with very different ideas and ways that we are interested in impacting, we all come with full hearts that are very eager to do exactly the best that we can because we're all committed to kids. And I do think sometimes that gets lost in some of the discussions and arguments. And sometimes it's hard when you're sitting here with someone that you very clearly disagree with on the strategy or solution to even remember that. But I do think local government is where it's at when it comes to having those kinds of relationships and recognizing that issue. So
I agree
with that,
with you
I
on
will
that.
be done.
Thank you. All right. Any other thoughts to share this evening?
Well, one more thing.
Right.
I mean, we could continue the love fest,
I
but
know.
I think that we've made it clear we are going to miss you guys. I wanted to touch base a little bit more on the town hall that we're going to have, just because we didn't really talk about the structure of it, and just to make sure that the community knows it's going to be a place where we're going to be taking it's going to be a very interactive setup. We have facilitators that are going to help to get all of any thoughts or questions anybody has kind of on the table, small group discussions that will lead into larger group discussions. So I just didn't want people to think that it was kind of another version of this on Thursday. So I don't know if you want to.
No, and the only thing I was going to add that the facilitators are planning for in each small group that are generated based off what individuals come in and say why they're there and their concerns or questions. Those groups will be formed 4 to 5 groups, and in each group there will be board members and district administrators there as the board members. They have some questions to help facilitate the conversation. So there will be opportunity to talk directly to board members and small groups, and then in the larger capacity, if it lends itself to that, towards the end. So hopefully people will come out and talk to our board members.
And thank you for sharing that. It's really important. I'm excited about that event. Thursday night, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Lawrence Public Library Auditorium. All right. And with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. And we have a retirement to recognize this evening.
We have one retirement. Deborah Roden has been a secretary with our schools, currently at Southwest Middle School, and she has been with the district for 23 years, so the board thanks you for your service. And with that, I move the Board of Education adopt the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh. Harmon,
Yes.
Ingram,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Sandburn,
Yes.
Beeson,
Yes.
Fincher.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to our reports and approvals. Item first this evening, board policy, our fundraising policy with David Cunningham, Executive Director of Human Resources and Chief Legal Counsel, and Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance.
Good evening. Thank you. Wanted to take just a minute. This evening is primarily for the board to have a conversation around this policy so that we can understand the kinds of questions that you may have or others may have so that we can continue working on this. This is what we generally would call the first reading, an opportunity for the board to take this under advisement and then continue to review and potentially revise. One of the things we thought we might do is just sort of give you an idea of kind of the why behind this policy. We think it's important to have some common guidelines across the district. We don't currently have that, either in direct policy that's been promulgated by the board or in our GAP or Guide to Administrative Policies. So some common guidelines and expectations around this are, we think, important. There are various issues that make that even more important when you think about some of the IRS rules. There are certain things you cannot do that would be for private inurement to individual students or to staff members, and so we need to be careful and vet fundraising in order to avoid that. CASHA, the Kansas State High School Activities Association, and the NCAA have specific rules around what athletes can receive in the context of fundraising. So Title IX is another issue. You have a particular sport that can have the capacity to generate large sums of money and other sports can't, and I'll use your typical football and softball as examples. Then you potentially have Title IX issues that need to be controlled a little bit. And so one of the other, two of the other things that we've noticed is crowd fundraising seems to be very popular, and we're seeing more and more of that. And the various entities or vehicles people use to do that type of fundraising are not necessarily being vetted as closely as maybe they should be. So we would like to do that. And then the messages that are being sent by those, whether it's a sport or some other organization, we want to make sure that the messaging around what they're fundraising is important for everybody to understand. So you might see uniforms and some fundraising material that's out there and draw the conclusion the board isn't providing uniforms for our teams, which is inaccurate. We do provide uniforms. So maybe this particular team wants to enhance the rotation of new uniforms into the mix, and so they're doing some fundraising for uniforms. But it doesn't mean that the board isn't supporting that sport or doing what it should do. So we think it's important that we have some guidelines around the information that's being distributed as people are fundraising. The other aspect of that is sometimes donors will have specific restrictions on the donation, and we need to have guidelines around how we're going to ensure that if I give you $1 for X, it actually goes to X and not to Y. So those are some of the broader kinds of issues that we're dealing with, and then as we go through the conversation this evening, Kathy's here to help us with any examples that might need to be shared as information for your discussion.
Thank you, David. Vanessa and I probably chime in just a little bit. We've been talking about this particular policy for quite some time. It's a policy that our district doesn't have that other districts do have. It's actually recommended policy from KASB to have a fundraising policy. So, as David mentioned, there's kind of a list of policy problems that we're trying to get at through the language in the policy, but I think it's important to stress that this is the draft. This is our first reading. We don't usually with policy, if it's something straightforward, it ends up on our consent agenda for a first reading, and if nobody has questions, it goes forward through the process. And we don't often have a chance to have this conversation, but we felt like because this was a new policy, and I'll credit Jessica for that. She said, we really need to talk about this, and I agree with that. It codifies a lot of existing practice around fundraising, is my understanding, but there's also some policy decisions that we have suggested in the draft that are a little different than maybe some existing practices. I think one of those that I could point out that we've talked about in particular would be door-to-door fundraising, and at what age level do we think it's appropriate to ask our students to do fundraising that may involve going to door, and the policy suggestion that we've made in the draft is that's really a high school level kind of activity and not for younger kids. So those are some of the kinds of discussions that we've had. Kathy has been integrally involved in coming up with the draft. She sees a lot of issues come across her desk as our finance director that relate to fundraising practices that, or things that have happened that haven't worked out the way they should have. And so with that, do you have some things to add?
Yeah, so I think, again, I think a lot of it is codifying existing practice, so not a huge change from what is already occurring. But I do think it's really important that we have listed in policy this idea from an equity perspective that you don't have to sell a certain number of cards in order to be on the team. You don't have to do this in order to be able to participate. And so making sure that students understand that they're not required to participate, making sure students and staff understand that participating in fundraising activities is never a condition to belong to a team or a club, and that their fundraising efforts shouldn't impact their participation time or their time playing or whatnot. We think that that was really important to be actually written here. We also, obviously, schools have the right and the self-determination in their buildings to determine what fundraisers to engage in, but there is some, sometimes our policy doesn't spell out we would prefer or this is discouraged, but this does have some of that language in there. I know a lot of elementary schools specifically have gotten really creative. Rather than selling cookie dough, they'll have kids come and walk laps and get donations for that, which 100% of the proceeds goes to the kids rather than selling trash bags or cookie dough or some, catalogs of overpriced items that accompany benefits as a result of the participation where the school gets a certain percentage. Yeah. And then I think ultimately, it may seem a little unwieldy to get pre-approval, but there have been situations in the district where a group will fundraise for a thing and then the school will get the thing and not need it, and then what do you do? And so having all of that kind of figured out ahead of the raising of the money saves a lot of headaches, and then you don't have a principal or a building leader who's left with something that they don't really know what to do with, and they don't want to dishonor the commitment of the community for actually providing it, but it just doesn't fit with our plan or whatnot, or there's equity concerns because now this school has this, but none of the other schools at that level do. And so really figuring out how to, I think Shannon and I often in policy talk about wanting to live in a world where we don't have to have children go out and sell things in order for the schools to function. We want to live in a world where our state government pays with our tax dollars, adequate amounts of money to support the educational services that we know students deserve and need. And we're not exactly there. And so what we don't want is for this policy to be seen as something that makes it harder for people who want to contribute to be able to contribute, but just actually makes it easier and make sure that all the tax implications and all the other things are thought through just to make sure that there aren't issues.
Right. It's a way, I think, by codifying a lot of these existing practices and kind of clarifying some other things, it's a way for us both to encourage positive fundraising activities for our schools where those are happening, and provide some protection both for our students, our staff, and also for donors, so that people can feel comfortable that if they're giving money to our district for a thing, that money is being spent on the thing that they were asked to give the money for. And I think so. It's really kind of designed to address all of those issues. I know board members have already started getting some questions about this, so this is an opportunity to share thoughts, concerns, ask questions. Kathy's prepared to share some examples with us of things that we're trying to work on through adopting this policy. So
yeah, I received a healthy amount of feedback, and it was probably in reaction to the article in the paper yesterday or this weekend, and also probably because there hasn't been a policy, and so it can be interpreted as having a policy is obviously going to be more restricted. But it sounds like maybe from some of Kathy's anecdotes and some things happen that there are things that we maybe need to tighten up on. I've had a lot of parents who are involved with either sports or other activities that are not sport related, concerned about, and specifically the crowdsource funding, or GoFundMe type of situation, and I'd like to maybe get a little bit more details about how we would be. What did it say? The building or the administrator has to be approved by the administrators. There's going to be a list of companies. It does seem to be a fairly efficient and popular thing right now because, and I think it's actually oddly works out in a very equitable way. Each kiddo isn't asked to go out and sell 20 booklets or come back with $200 of sales. It's the group effort, and so it really doesn't matter that you don't have your parents don't have 10 friends that will give you the money to meet your goal, because it really is a group thing. So it's been, I think it's been a positive for that reason, and it's been fairly easy and effective and safe. So that was actually a concern that was brought to me by a number of people, so I would like to hear that spoken to. And I think the rest of the concerns sound like maybe just answered in the policy itself, rather than just wondering how the reins are going to be tightened.
And if you want to talk to this first, we did talk for a little while about that, how to word that online fundraising or crowdfunding area, and I don't think the purpose was to try and make it really restrictive.
Right. It's just, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction that this has been something that's working and now we can't do it. Oh gosh, now what are you going to do? So.
Yeah, the policy doesn't prohibit that, but what I would tell you is that there probably needs to be some value judgment in the context of how much should the company take. So is 20% too high? One of them I'm familiar with, you donate $100, 80 goes to the program, 20 goes to the company.
I will say this though, but just before we run with that, that there is a lot of upfront work that the I don't even know what whatever company we're talking about, that makes it possible. And so it's very easy and it's very safe and it's very structured and documentation is given. So I hate to just bag on whoever perceives that we're talking about them, but it's a new vehicle that has been used
and so
successfully.
From our perspective, has somebody looked at that and determined that there's actually work being done in exchange for the price that they're paying for that? And I don't know at this point whether we have that kind of examination of each company that's being considered for that type of fundraising activity. So, but individual students are sending emails to individuals that they know or their parents know to solicit funds. So while it is group-oriented, it's also oriented towards individual students in some cases.
So we're not saying we can't do crowdfunding. That's not the intent, and really the policy pretty much is, we want to try to look at what are viable companies, what makes sense. There are some out there that are not, and so it's just a matter of making sure that kind of gets looked at, that you go into it knowing and understanding there is an admin fee, so I'm not expecting 100% of what people donate to actually come to me, and so that's clear and understanding to those that set it up. The other misunderstanding, I think, a little bit is there's only one tax ID number for the school district, for each of the schools. All their programs fall under that one legal entity. So they want to say or have it go into wrestling or swimming or whatever it is, and that's fine, and we'll make sure that the money goes back to that specific sport. But when you're legally setting it up, you're not setting it up that way, because that's not the legal name that matches with our tax-exempt IRS number when you do an IRS TIN match, and so it'll kick out. So if it's not done right, it could kick out and say, well, this entity doesn't exist because it doesn't match this taxpayer identification number. So it's a matter of vetting some of that, making sure that how it's being set up has all the proper stuff, then it works fine. And it's also that understanding of the approval process is more that plan. What are you fundraising for? What's the money going to go to? What's the timeline of when those things are going to be purchased, so that the donor knows on the site that this is what I'm donating for, this is how or what is going to be purchased, and the kids this season are going to get that, or is it for 3 years from now, or whatever it is. part of what we have seen on a couple that has created is things were listed on there that probably the district was already funding. And so it made it sound like that wasn't happening and that they needed money just to do something, and that wasn't the case. So vetting it a little bit so that the language is appropriate and it doesn't sound like begging and it doesn't sound like I'm asking money for something and then in turn it's really not going to be used for that because the district paid for that. So I'm going to turn around and use it for this, and I as a donor didn't even know that. Field improvements was an example of one, in that the district does field improvements. They don't need to fundraise to do field improvements. And so that shouldn't have been in the language that was put online for the person's donating to. So it's really the approval process, and the idea is that it needs to just go through a couple of layers of viewing, making sure that it makes sense, that the language that's out there is appropriate, the legal compliance stuff is in place, that if there is sales tax or there is supposed to be an acknowledgement to a donor, is the company doing it or are we obligated to do it? And each one is different. Some of them the company does it because they're contributing directly. Some say it's sort of a pass-through based on where the money ends up. Well, we need to make sure the money ends up with an entity that's truly tax exempt, or the charitable donation has been misrepresented, and then that's problematic with IRS. So it's really just a matter of the vetting of that. So the crowdfunding being set up correctly, the language on the plan. So those are some of the things related to that. They are very easy. It's one check back. It goes to the program. They can do what they need to. The other one that's very popular right now and is easy and works really well and is also creating a nice environment is like a Chipotle or dine and earn. You know, you got the school all coming to the same restaurant that night. They meet with their friends. They get to eat, get a commission off the dinner, and it comes back to the program or group. And those are very easy to do, and they don't require some of the door-to-door or personal, sales of so many or things like that. So I don't know if that helps answer your question a little bit.
Jessica? Okay, so I'm going to apologize in advance to making this a very specific example, but I would like a little bit of information from you guys in regards to the fun run at Liberty Memorial Central. So if we have a policy that's prohibiting elementary and middle school students from going door to door, certainly with the fun run, those kids are going door to door. So I'm curious how that will affect that particular event, and there may be more at other schools, but I just know that that's, kind of the fundraiser for that school, and it's got kind of a long tradition.
Was it just grade school kids? I mean, what was that?
It was middle school.
And that was because, what age is the appropriate, and that's something that you may all decide to change to be.
If we left that in there as is, it would affect
It would affect that. There are some concerns with people thinking that even at middle school, I have heard that they're not comfortable with students going door to door carrying cash and money. They're at risk. They're walking door to door. Are they going to a neighborhood? Maybe it's not a kid-friendly house. Are they by themselves? Do they have an adult? Should they have an adult? Should they carry money on their person and be out on the street? I don't, those are all concerns that we just need to philosophically, yes, no. And so it was written elementary and middle. And I know that that's a very popular and traditional fundraiser, and don't know that they've had any issues. Don't know if that's a concern or not. 8th grader's a lot different than a kindergartner or a 1st grader or 2nd grader. So I think some of that's personal perspective as to what that age should be. But yes, if it stays at middle school, that could potentially limit that door-to-door kind of fundraising. And so I think that warrants a discussion as to what is that right age. And that's a little bit of a philosophical discussion. And I, as a parent, may have a different opinion than, and I think that's all fair. And I think part of it is, are they being forced to do it? And if they're not comfortable doing that, and it's okay, they can fundraise a different way and not feel like sometimes that competitive incentive that can be problematic, and kids think they have to go out and raise because they've been told that that's what they have to do, and then they kind of get stuck in an environment that maybe wasn't healthy. So those are, some of that is philosophical, and so had to get something down on paper as a starting point and a discussion to see where that might land when it's.
So is now the time to discuss that?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I kind of feel like at that age, those kids are walking to school at times at some length. I'm totally understand this notion of cash in pockets and that being problematic. Certainly, I would hope that the teachers and staff are encouraging students to go in pairs or in groups and not alone in their neighborhoods. But maybe we should be thinking of not including middle school in this policy, in this particular thing. I mean, I would certainly be supportive of taking that out.
And also, I think there's an issue of culture and tradition. It's ownership over.
There may be a way to.
Where they're starting in the teams and everything.
Right.
So
There may be a way to address some of the concerns that we've talked about without including middle schoolers in that particular way. So one way that you could do that would be, because I think some of the things we were trying to get at were those fundraisers that I've had kids come to my door where I've been told, I was told I have to go out and sell so many of these things or collect so much money to do X thing. And my concern that kind of, as we had this discussion in the policy committee was, I can't envision a circumstance where we should be telling middle school students, you have to do this. Now, if it's by choice, if it's, there's a wide range of maturity between 6th and 8th grade, and even within, thinking of my own middle schooler. So maybe some families are comfortable with choosing to do that and some aren't. But I think for me, the thing I was trying to get at is this notion that we have had circumstances where students felt compelled to do it.
It shouldn't be pay to play.
Right, shouldn't be paid.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Like,
I
I
see
think
what you're
even at
saying.
Central, they do a dance, right? And so I think that we could basically say, okay, you can still do the fundraising, but it doesn't matter if the kid brought in any money or not. They still get into that dance. That's sort of the celebration at the end. I mean, because I do agree, like, kids shouldn't feel like they have to get money or sell
Stuff.
booklets of coupons or whatever it is in order to be able to participate. That part of it I totally agree with. But the age here of where you can and can't maybe go through your neighborhood and ask for donations is, I guess, the question I'm raising.
And we could discourage it rather than prohibit it. We could discourage it.
Prohibited for elementary, discourage.
I think elementary
There's
is
a wide range of maturity during that period of time, and it's really, I think maybe more appropriate for the family to decide.
right.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's fair feedback. So.
I mean, we could encourage students to talk with their families before going door to door, and then allow parents to make that choice. Because you're right. I mean, it's not the nanny state. Like, we can't prohibit them from going door to door. I mean, I'd certainly feel comfortable with my elementary student going door to door on my block because we know all those people. So those are neighbors that we know, and that's a little bit different, I think, than a traditional kind of door to door sales approach.
I think they typically in the middle school, I can only speak for Liberty Memorial, that's usually in the guidelines, like don't travel alone,
Right, you get a little sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So perhaps this is also something that best practices of that nature would end up in the gap or the guidance to staff to implement the policy.
That it's communicated and shared so that they kind of understand what's a safe way to walk in your neighborhood and not at night and with somebody and, just some of those different things, especially if they're handling money or product and they're carrying it around.
We also talked about, after we adopt this policy, taking it to PTOs and site councils so that they know about it. And then also, like, there's a bullet point, raffles are allowed if performed in compliance with Kansas Department of Revenue lottery law and district guidelines. And so keeping in mind, raffles used to be against the law, and then there was a recent law, but still figuring out what that specific regulation looks like and how we have to do it and to comply with the law varies a bit. And because we're a large entity, like, tracking that and being able to report it. I will note, we just passed it on consent agenda without any fanfare at all, but our audit was favorable with no significant weaknesses or findings, and that is due to Kathy's excellent management.
That's right.
So I appreciate that. I know that we don't usually make a big deal about that, but it is a big deal and took a lot of your time. And so I think, being able to ensure that people know about it who are actually doing the work is important and part of this process that we talked about.
So I think it's important just for board members to know, and I can't remember if you mentioned this or not, once we finished the first draft of this, Kathy and David did send it to all of our building leaders for feedback, and then we sent it a second time to the high school principals in particular, because we were really wanting to get that feedback about how is this going to impact the groups that are doing fundraising at your building. And so we've tried to reach out to building leaders to get some input so that we kind of had an idea of what their thoughts were going to be about how this is going to impact what's currently going on. Anyway, I just want to make sure everybody knew that. Additional questions or comments? We have a couple of public comments on this agenda item, so.
Well, I got one really specific
Okay.
question. So
Right.
basically, it's on page 3, line 15. I just have a question. It says facilities and equipment. Should that be supplies as well? Is supplies mentioned anywhere else in that list of bullet points on that page?
I'm not sure. David, can you answer that question?
You mean
I don't see it. What is it under? This
Supplies are not
format.
listed.
Should it be?
maybe,
Perhaps it should be.
I mean, to me, it's different than equipment.
Okay. So that was, can you tell me the page again?
Page 3,
3, line 15.
It says facilities and
It
equipment.
may be in a different part of the policy. It's
Yeah,
not
it
in
wasn't-
the laundry list.
I didn't search
We'll
so many.
cross-check.
Oh.
There you are, okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Other questions or comments before we do our, we have our public comment on this one? No? Okay. We have two speakers who'd like to comment. The first is, I apologize if I butcher this name, Nailu Vakil?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please come to the microphone, and our guidelines are 5 minutes or less, please, and you can share with us your thoughts. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to talk, and thank you so much for writing these guidelines. I think it's extremely important that the safety and security of our children, obviously, that's first, and the guidelines to streamline the fundraising. I think it's amazing that we are actually going through that and making sure that we're all sort of on the same page as far as the equity of what we do in different schools. So I really appreciate that. Having said that, I think there are a couple of things that I'm the president of PTO at Hillcrest. Just listening to the conversation, first of all, it clarified a lot of vagueness of that article that was published yesterday, and a lot of people had concerns. They came to us and asked us to come and see you guys, contact you. So this is why I'm here. Also, I feel like for Hillcrest specifically, because that's what I know, and I'm just going to address what I know, the fundraising part of it for the door-to-door, I have some issues with that, because I think for the kids to be able to go to the doors with their parents, I think it should be with an adult, and knock on the doors, make eye contacts, and have a goal. That not only creates an entrepreneurship for the kids at that age, it also builds a community. It also builds a community that the neighbor is going to come and ask you, hey, what happened to that playground that you guys built? Thank you for doing that. And those are the things that we were able to do at Hillcrest by those door-to-door fundraisings. And with the traditions that you mentioned, we have a hawk walk that is the same tradition, long, long tradition of kids going to door to door, not selling anything to anyone, but asking to raise money, even if it's $1, if it's 50 cents, towards a goal. And that is going to create a hindrance for schools like ours, which we never sell anything to anyone. We encourage students to go to these dine and donates and create a community. And it's all about just having a goal and doing the fundraising for the goal. And it's clear of what we need. And it's one thing that we need that this district can't afford to do, or it's not where we need to be. So not necessarily equipment, but for example, we did a sign in front of Hillcrest that cost us $7,000 or $6,500, and we were able to do that by this fundraising, by the Hawk Walk fundraising that we didn't sell anything to anyone. So I want you guys to reconsider, even the kids at elementary school, because that idea of entrepreneurship has to happen early. That idea of community building and a goal that goes towards that should be happening at that elementary level, not later on, not at the middle school. I totally agree with the safety and security aspect of it, and I think it's a very valid concern. if in the guidelines we can help to do something else about that safety and security aspect that we all obviously want for our children, and we can still go and door-to-door fundraise, I think that would be a better option for us in this policy. So out of everything that I heard, that's the only thing that I see that will affect us directly and it would create this big hindrance for us at our school level in the elementary level.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that input. All right, our next speaker, Jody Meyer, please.
Hello. I have 3 kids at Broken Arrow, South, and Lawrence High School, all of whom have been engaged in fundraising. My son has done football and basketball fundraising at LHS. So to me, when I hear this initial conversation, it seems like a lot of this policy is directed towards high school athletic fundraising, but maybe not exclusively. I am here because upon reading this, I found out about it through the Journal World article last night, is my concern about how this impacts primarily elementary school PTAs, PTOs, but also middle school level PTA, PTOs. I think it's unnecessarily burdensome and sounds micromanaging to suggest that even a PTA must get any fundraising activities pre-approved in writing by the principal and supervised, because I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know if that means every little thing that we do that raises money, such as a school book fair, if we take book fair proceeds in cash from Scholastic, to minor things such as every eat and earn that we do. I think at Broken Arrow anyway, we've tried to do it every month or every other month. And although Mr. McCaffrey is a great principal, he's been there the whole time I've been there, the idea that having to get all these things in writing just seems a little bit unnecessary. The other questions that I had were also related to the issue of the door-to-door sales. And in particular, one of my questions was what constitutes door-to-door sales? And this was touched upon a little bit earlier. Obviously selling trash bags, which is something that our school has done because some people like expensive, thick trash bags, would be among those items. But we do a walkathon every year in which we ask for donations, and that is a primary fundraiser for the Broken Arrow PTA. It's easy to do. People can donate, go straight to us. Nobody takes a percentage. But I don't see how that wouldn't fall under a rubric of door-to-door sales if kids are going around asking for people to sign up and donate. So I think that portion of door-to-door sales needs to be defined if it's going to be restricted. I like the idea, as you suggested, that maybe something be discouraged. I think that these things can be handled well, door-to-door sales, even at the elementary school level, and is not necessarily something that needs to be prohibited. My other question had been, and I do admit I emailed Kathy and Dave this morning to try to get some more answers to that, was just about what control that this policy would suggest that the school district might have over the proceeds that are raised by the PTA or PTOs, because the language indicates that perhaps there may be some degree of control that the district might try to assert in deciding what the PTA or PTO spends its money on. Maybe that was not anyone's intention, but it certainly sounds to some degree like that is the case. I know Kathy mentioned to me that in her email that the PTA or PTO should work with the principal and the site council to decide what to use those funds for. I've said this at a previous board meeting. The majority of parents do not know what a site council does, or has never been to one. I can tell you that in my 10 years of having kids in school in Lawrence, that site council members, aside from the principal, don't come to the meetings and vice versa. Our principals have always been involved to some degree, at least by coming to our PTA meetings about how we use that money for. But that's something that I just want the board to know is a concern is if in any way that the board is trying to micromanage what the PTAs are doing with their money, or in any way trying to say that it needs to be spent in a certain way. And unfortunately, Broken Arrow doesn't have all that money we're not really talking about a whole lot as compared to some other schools. But, that is still a concern. I don't think that The folks involved with the PTOs were aware that this was on the agenda for tonight. I know that Kathy had mentioned that the principals reviewed it and it was up to them to send it on. I can tell you that the Broken Arrow PTA was not aware of it. Neither was the South CPO, which I'm on, and I don't think Prairie Park was either. So I would just say that I think that there needs to be some more public input into it, especially regarding the PTA and CPO aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer, for your input. We really appreciate you being here tonight. We had talked about having this on for first reading tonight and an opportunity for feedback. We've clearly gotten some feedback and some things to think about. I know our agenda says approving it for first reading to have a final reading in our January meeting, but I think that it would be a good thing for us to take a little bit more time. So probably what we're going to do is take this feedback. We have some other groups that we want to talk to that have come up in some of the comments that we've received by email in the last day or so, and make revisions as suggested, work on this issue about the door-to-door sales, try to see if we can come up with some language that meets the concerns that have been expressed, but also still provides some guidance as to how to handle these things. Because obviously our utmost concern in that one was really about student safety and making sure that we're not asking students to do something that puts them in an unsafe situation. So I think there's some room for us to improve that language, and then we'll probably bring it back for another first reading after, or it depends on the extent of the revisions, David. This is...
If we do what the legislature calls a gut and go, we probably ought to do another first reading.
We are not going to take that approach to our policy.
I think there's a lot good here to work from.
Define it, then it would just be a continuation. We would do another report, share with the board the changes that have been made, continue the conversation, and then you would have it on a subsequent meeting for final action.
Okay, so I think we'll make some changes, get some additional feedback, report that back to the board one more time before we ask the board to approve. So there's some additional opportunity for PTOs to weigh in and other groups that may be interested.
Is there a way that we can make sure that the schools are aware of this, so that if there is input that
yes, we can do that.
Like
yeah, we can do that.
Blindsided?
Yes.
And also, I think maybe spelling it out a little more specifically, like, hey, if this is what you're planning, this is what it might look like, to give some examples. I do think that the purpose is not to necessarily create a large amount of onerous paperwork that has to be filled out every week or whatever. I think with the example, like an eat and earn, if it's a monthly thing, you could talk to the principal and say, this is our kind of plan, we're going to do this, and then this is generally what we expect to have happen from that and how we're going to apply it. And I think it's just a matter of making sure everyone's on the same page so that there aren't those situations where, you know, at the end of the year, Kathy receives something with like a tax ID number that says it's the district, but has no idea what those funds were or what they were used for. It's just a matter of to more effectively keep track of things that we are legally obligated to keep track of, and then also kind of that equity piece.
And we have had, this is some of the examples that we talked about in policy. We have had some situations where some things have been purchased that either were not usable or created some liability. So an example that hasn't happened in a while, because our facilities and operations folks are doing an excellent job in this area now, and we made a lot of improvements through the bond issue, but I know that in the past, some of the playground equipment and I'm not talking about the Hillcrest equipment. so for the Hillcrest parent, no, I'm not talking about Ryan Gray Playground at all. This is a different example from many years ago, but not exactly in compliance with current ADA requirements. And so then that creates a situation where our facilities folks have to go back in and spend money and make changes to make sure that we're in compliance with those. So what we're trying to do is head those things off before they happen, rather than having to go back in and fix it after the fact, basically. So I think there's some tweaking that we can do with that language to meet the concerns that have been expressed. David.
Two things real quick. Any emails that you have that share specific concerns, if you could send those to Kathy or myself, so we can begin to work on that. And then also, Jody pointed out most, if not any, well, I don't think any of the PTAs are meeting in December. PTA, PTO, so that would mean we would need to have some opportunities in January. So don't think in terms of the second board meeting in January with final action. It'll be February or later to give us time to get through some of that.
Which is okay, though, because we're really needing, the timeline for this is to get it in place for the following school year. So we've got some time to work on it. All right, great. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm sorry, my screen has gone dark again. I know we have another report coming up with Sam.
HR recruiting.
Okay. This is our HR recruiting report with Sam Reed-Devin and Terry McEwen.
Not Terry.
Oh, no, not Terry. You're just here helping her.
My
See, this is
technical
what happens
assistance.
when I don't have my agenda in front of me. My apologies.
I think Melissa and I are educators. We could do a brain break with the group. What do you think?
Okay, here we go. HR recruiting report. David Cunningham, Executive Director of Human Resources and Chief Legal Counsel, and Sam Reed-Devin, Director of Human Resources. I get it right that time.
Yes, and while she's getting the materials on the screen, Samri's put this together. She's going to walk through the basics of what's here, and then we'll certainly entertain any questions. Anna is very active in recruiting as well, and typically travels. Samri and Anna have been going to various conferences to. A lot of them will have recruitment fairs and stuff. She'll talk a little bit about that as well. So,
Yeah, I know Anna, Dr. Stubblefield will probably chime in because HR is still near and dear to her heart. So, well, good evening. I'm Sam Reed-Devin, Director of Human Resources. Along beside me tonight is David Cunningham, Executive Director of Human Resources. And we're going to provide you just real quickly with a HR update. So first we'd like to begin by just sharing a couple of slides with you tonight about some national data that that is provided with us by the National Center for Education Statistics. And so as you can see, they predict that white students will represent 46% of public school students in 2024. Again, this is prediction, which is a drop from 51% of the student population in 2012. During that same 12-year time frame, as you can see, the proportion of Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander students is projected to increase. Hispanic public school students are projected to represent 29% of the total enrollment in 2024 compared to 24% in 2012. There is also a projected increase of Asian Pacific Islander, and Black students are projected to be 15% of all public school students. So as you can see, slide 3 here, we're going to share with you the elementary and secondary school teacher workforce in the United States, of course, is not racially diverse as a population at large, are our students. While students of color are expected to make up 50% of the student population by 2004, as you saw in the previous slide, our educators are still overwhelmingly white. And as you can see, this graph was a little hard to understand, so I kind of put some key points in there for you. The good news, and I know it's very small, but is that the population of public school teachers has gradually become more diverse over time, as you can see. And the school year 87-88, school year 87% of the teachers were white compared to 82% in the 11-12 school year. And our Hispanic educators grew from 3% to 8%. It's nice to see because that's a population of our students that continue to grow. And Asian increased slightly with Black educators having just a slight decrease. Of course, as I know this is not news to any of you, but while the number of teachers kind of keeps dwindling a little bit, as you can see, our teachers of color are still underrepresented in our nation's schools. So let's look at our Lawrence Public School student demographics. As you can see, this graph shows the composition of all of our student body by various population groups. This includes all of our enrolled students, and this was taken just a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at I didn't do any trend data for you because if you look at our KSDE under our district report card, you'll notice that over the past 5 years, our demographics have remained kind of constant over time here in Lawrence Public Schools. But all of that is on KSDE. what we did do is the next few slides, we'll highlight the racial ethnicity makeup of our staff, and I've kind of broken that down into different employee groups for all of you tonight, and kind of took some trend data for you for the past 4 years. And our first slide here spotlights our certified staff. And as you know, our certified staff includes our teachers, our counselors, our social workers, speech path, and all of our licensed personnel. And then we go to our classified staff. And our classified staff primarily includes our paraprofessionals, our food service, maintenance, and custodians. And this employee group has seen a bit more of an increase in diversity than our other employee groups over the past 4 years. And this group here is our administrators, and both our school and our district administrators. And we even broke it down a little bit farther for you for our additional, this would be our additional assignments and non-contracted employees, which include our Rule 10 coaches, our AVID and NAS, and KU tutors with our students. And they have a pretty intimate relationship with a lot of our students because there's a one-on-one tutor there. And then if we put it all together, then that is our racial diversity of our total staff, as you can see.
Sammy, I just want to ask real quick, do all the board members know what Rule 10 coaches are? That'd be some, I've heard that.
Rule 10 coaches?
Okay, maybe explain what a Rule 10 coach is.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with Matt today with that. Our Rule 10 coaches are non-licensed coaches that can coach sports. And if you want to add anything to that.
We have a fair number of Rule 10 coaches over time. Certified staff cannot be required to coach. Years ago, they could, but the laws changed. And so when we don't have enough teachers that want to participate and coach various athletic or extracurricular activities, then we post and consider outside folks that want to do that. So we have people employed who are both classified and Rule 10. We have people who are not employed with us in any capacity other than a Rule 10 position, whether it's an activity or athletic event. So,
and is Rule 10 a CASHA rule?
CASHA,
is that why we call it Rule 10?
It's CASHA's Rule 10 that allows a non-certified person to coach. And they have some rules around that in terms of the kind of mentoring that's necessary before they can be fully responsible. And I don't have that rule memorized. I don't know.
Matt does.
Yeah. Might explain that real quick.
Again.
So Keisha has supervised and unsupervised. Basically, you are unsupervised until you pass CPR and then go through a year of supervision, take a couple certification tests and do that. Most of our Rule 10 coaches stay unsupervised, which means when they travel away from the facilities, they have to have a certified staff member accompany them with the trip.
Okay. That term has come up a couple of times. I just want to make sure board members knew what that was.
Okay, thank you. You know, as we continually minimally strive to have our staff diversity match our student diversity, of course, as all of you know, are aware, we're still not there yet, but I think that's the important word, yet, because we all do and understand and believe that a diverse staff can provide significant benefits to all of our students. So, so our next couple of steps, our next couple of slides, of course, is going to, we're going to visit with you a little bit about recruitment. And Anna can help chime in here. We've actually added 2 new recruitment sites to our, we added 2 new recruitment stats with a focus on recruiting staff of color along with our past recruitment places. The Pittsburgh Education Recruitment Consortium, which is called PERC, is a well-respected recruitment event and it's overwhelming at times. It was huge. So there's over 25 states that attend this fair. And 30 colleges and universities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and northern West Virginia are represented with over 1,000 teaching candidates there. And we heard about this with, we were at another recruitment fair next to Liberal, Kansas. And they actually told us about this recruitment fair, and they have recruited teachers from this. So, and it's also a great opportunity because there's a lot of college recruiters there to get our information to college recruiters and information about our district. So Dr. Stubblefield and I also attended the National Alliance of Black School Educators Conference this past fall, and we're still communicating back and forth with a few candidates in hopes that they will join our district. And I think next year our goal for this is to send more of our diverse staff to this, because part of that is a staff development piece, and so we can, build leadership capacity and also have them have staff of color recruit for us. So. This is what I'm very excited about. Last year we held our first certified recruitment fair, and we hosted it in-house, and this took place at the College and Career Center, and we had over 60 candidates that came to attend, and it was such a positive experience for everyone. And we took advantage of the opportunity to highlight our equity work. We also, our wellness initiatives, gardening in our schools, and our personal learning efforts, all of this, we provided information to our candidates. The candidates, the feedback that we received mostly from them was that they had the opportunity to visit with first and second year teachers, and they stayed. This was about a 2.5-hour fair, and they stayed almost the entire time. So they were visiting with all of our district staff and also our principals. Our principals had opportunities to do interviews for them, and it was just wonderful. They really enjoyed visiting with those first and second year teachers about their experiences in Lawrence, though. So next year we're going to do this again in March. So you want something just a good feel and a positive energy, as you need to come to this in March. So I invite all of you to come.
Simri, how many candidates did we hire from that fair?
13. Okay, and we also do in-house classified recruitment fairs, and we started this last year. And again, we held 2 last year, and 1 in August, and we're having another one starting in January. And what our candidates here really appreciate is when they come into our district, our HR site, and so they get personal one-on-one experience with having to navigate our online applicant, and having help and support there. And especially we have all kinds of different positions advertised for our classified staff, and so they get to ask questions and kind of see what's the best fit for them. So our HR staff really takes good care of them. So we usually have, we don't have a huge attendance, but we have about 12 to 15 candidates come to that. So the next slide, of course, is this just happened last week. So we included this slide because it shows the commitment that we have to recruit educators that are committed to our equity work. And when we attend, Dr. Stubblefield and I and others attend our recruitment fairs, we share our work. And we're proud of that work, and we engage in conversations with potential teachers about our equity work. And of course, all of these efforts are very important and very valuable, the ones that I just visited with you about, but we're still not there, and we want to be with our diverse teaching staff, with staff for our students. So we started thinking we need to start growing our own. And so this is one of our attempts here, is that we have a very talented para pool, and so what we are going to do with that is that we need to start growing and supporting our paraprofessionals to help them become highly effective teachers. And to be able to do that, we started conversations I have with these 2 organizations, and I'm very hopeful with this, and hopefully that we'll be able to come back. What we're trying to do is to have an open house for people from these 2 organizations come to our school district, have an open house, have our paras and other certified staff that are interested in becoming a licensed personnel, give them lots of information they could on financial aid support, on they can bring their transcripts in and they'll do a review of their transcripts. And what we're hoping to do is have a cohort group of paras that we can support this cohort group as they go through this and for their licensure. So I'm going to be excited to come back in the springtime and visit with you about this. What we're doing this week is we're sending out a survey to all of our paras and classified staff to see if they are interested in this, to kind of gauge where they are, so we can follow back up with these universities.
And these 2 universities were selected because they offer programs that allow the parents to continue to work full-time and not have to enroll
Yeah.
in school.
And we've actually-
some
yeah.
local colleges
Sure.
that don't necessarily offer that option. So we were looking for options for
Yeah.
individuals who have to continue to
Yeah.
work.
And actually, we've had a couple of student teachers that have been able to still work in their para role as they're completing their some of their coursework and, of course, some of their internships with Fort Hays. Grand Canyon University is all online, and we talk to them a lot in some of our recruitment fairs. We've actually have hired teachers from Grand Canyon University now in our classrooms. So excited about these two opportunities. So we'd like to thank you for your continued support of our HR efforts and see if you, and we'll entertain any questions that you may have for us tonight.
I think I spoke with you, Dr. Stubblefield, about how you attended some of these fairs and that made a real impact on the potential applicants or what's the word I'm looking for? Candidates,
There
thank
you
you.
go.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that this is something that we have a lot of people interested in impacting positively, because I do know it's going to get harder. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's not only harder to recruit candidates that reflect the racial makeup of our district for a number of reasons, but as fewer and fewer people choose public education or education in general as their career path, the pool is smaller. And I do think that there are a lot of positive things going on in Lawrence Public Schools that would make this a great place for people to work. But I appreciate the efforts that everyone is taking.
Yeah. And they are amazed at our superintendent there at some of those recruitment fairs, too, so they appreciate that. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our final report for this evening is on graduation rates with Terry McEwen, Director of Assessment, Research, and Accountability.
And I have to punch some more buttons. Hang on.
Well, while Terry's getting geared up, I just want to say Dr. Stubblefield participated in a panel discussion at the KASB convention last weekend on diversity as a competitive advantage. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was this grow your own program, and it was Garden City, right?
Yeah.
That was, the superintendent was on the panel, and that's something that they are doing. And so I'm really excited to see us take some steps to create our own robust program in that area. I think it can make a big impact. I'm finished, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Terry McEwen, Director of Assessment, Research, and Accountability. I'm going to talk a little bit about graduation rates. This associates to the 2017 school year, so these are students who would have graduated in May and or would have finished all their requirements for credits by September 30 of 2017. So that's why this report is always lagging, is because students do have until September 30 of the year following, or the year following their cohort graduation in order to complete their requirements. I have depicted the report a little differently tonight to you than we have done since about 2009. We've been using line graphs, and the purpose of that was kind of to show across a cohort of time, longitudinally closing the achievement gaps. And we also only used the data from our two brick-and-mortar high schools, Lawrence High School and Free State, because up until this year, the virtual school did not have an exact group of students who were all theirs for 4 years. The first year, there was only, one particular senior class, and then we had a junior and a senior class, and then finally, now 4 years later, we really have the full group. So that's why they're being portrayed tonight. So I want to focus first on the two things. One is the Kansas Vision for Education, and by the state board's vision, one of the accountable measures is high school graduation. So that's one reason for this, and the other attaches to your board goal of developing and aligning expectations for curriculum so that all students will be successful. So we're going to attach to both of those goals, both the state goal and our district goal, as we talk about this report. I know that this is redundant to the report, to the memo that's in the packet, but I want to emphasize a couple of things in the definitions. First of all, it's important to remember that Before 2009, graduation rates were reported in a completely different way. It was the number of seniors who started the year and who graduated. Beginning in 2009, the Federal Department of Education changed the parameters around how we would measure graduation from high school, and the clock begins ticking when a student becomes a ninth grader. And then they have 4 years to graduate from high school, or September 30th of the time following, to actually complete those credits and actually graduate as part of that cohort. The cohort is adjusted annually based upon transfers into the cohort. So a student might enter high school, move here and start in their sophomore year or their junior year, and then legitimate transfers out. They exit because they moved to California and went to school there. They moved from Free State to Lawrence High. They moved somewhere within the state or across the states, or sometimes even to another country, but we have to produce the records that they actually attended school in order for that transfer to actually be legitimate. Things that count against the district as non-graduates would be such items as a student transfers to a non-accredited private school. We have a couple of examples in our town. They might go to a GED program. That counts against the graduation rate. They might go to homeschooling. That counts against the graduation rate. So I think it's really important to focus on the last bullet. The word non-graduate is quite different from the word dropout. And I think sometimes in conversations we hear those two used synonymously, and they're not. Discontinuing schooling is an actual reason to not graduate, but it's only one of a variety of reasons that a student might be counted as a non-graduate, not the only reason. So, the other thing to talk about in this data is that there is a difference in the 2017 data when this particular set of data, by the way, is just Lawrence High School, Free State High School, but you notice I used the word JDC. In 2017, in 16-17, a rule was changed at the State Department. Prior to that time, we have been counting our JDC students with the district office. So they were only impacting a district metric, not the individual high schools. We're no longer allowed to do that. The students who are attending the day school for any reason, either in the day school side or the other side, will be counted at one of our two brick and mortar high schools. And so the way it started out was that if they lived north of 15th, they were at Free State, and if they were south of 15th, they're at Lawrence High School. And then as additional students were added, we just went every other one, so that we would apportion this out. But one of the reasons, potential reasons, to address why you would see a slight dip in 2017 is because we have now included students that we didn't traditionally report on, okay? So just want to make sure that everybody is clear on that. So this depicts our graduation rate for the two brick and mortar high schools, including students from the Juvenile Detention Center in the non-ethnic or racial subgroups across time. And again, I went away from line graphs because remember I floated the lines in and you never knew what the numbers really were. This gives us a chance to kind of focus in on what the real numbers are. Now I'm going to use the same exact four subgroups, but this time we've added in the Lawrence Virtual School graduation class. So again, this is a cohort of students that began in 2013-14 and graduated in 2017. So it's the same four subgroups as you saw before, and you'll see that the number changed for the totals. I know this is a lot of colors, but this is 4 years of data across our racial and ethnic subgroups. So again, I put all to the far left just so we can kind of keep a comparison piece there. And then our Hispanic, white, black, and Native American, Asian, and multiracial students' graduation rates are then depicted. This is, again, for Lawrence High, Free State High, and students at the Juvenile Detention Center.
But not virtual?
No,
Okay, is
not
that
yet.
coming? Okay.
That's next.
Thank you.
Okay. Oops, wrong button. Stop it. Now, this is the same data set, or the same grouping, but now I've included the Lawrence Virtual School into the data. Why is it only 4 years? Because remember, we've only had 4 years of data from our own Lawrence Virtual School, so I can't back up to 2013 because that would be, there was no data from that year.
Excuse me, Chair. So, in general, I know you don't have an exact number, but what percentage of virtual school students are represented in these graphs?
So in the next set of slides, I'm going to show you school by school. So it'll give you an accurate picture, and I'm going to also give you the exact numbers.
Okay.
So using LHS, Free State, JDC, and Lawrence Virtual School, these are the exact numbers that are currently appearing at the State Department. And so the number in the cohort is the column to the left. That's the number of students that I depicted that said these kiddos started high school in 9th grade in the year 2013-14, that number. The number of graduates is the number of students who actually graduated from one of our institutions in the spring of 2017 and or completed credits by September 30, and then the exact graduation percentage rate that's associated with those numbers. The reason it's important fun to look at the numbers is that when we get into some subgroups that have pretty small numbers, 1 or 2 students moving to Bishop Seabury, as an example, really change those percentage rates quite significantly. Another thing to think about is when we're looking at the graduation data and you're looking at either trends up or trends down or stair steps or whatever else, we're sort of tempted to go back a few weeks when I presented the achievement data, and you're thinking about, does the achievement data that we presented longitudinally correlate in any way with the graduation rate? And the quick answer to that is not really, because the achievement data that I presented was based upon state assessments, number one, of students who, 4 students that most of these are not represented by, because they would have been sophomores in 2015, and that was when the cable was cut at the University of Kansas, and so a lot of those results were suspect. And then high schools don't take MAP, so we don't really have that exact associated data with this. The other reason that it's difficult to draw straight lines here is because there are so many variables in the high school graduation rate portrayal that we'd have no control over. An example would be, you might have a student who is a straight A student, maybe even number 1 in his or her class, that suddenly, because they can be on varsity and not be JV, would transfer as a sophomore to Bishop Seabury. Now they've gone to a non-accredited high school. They're now going to count against us in this graduation rate, but they were a straight A student. They did graduate from a high school, and they were, a high achiever. Well, we can't, we have no control over that, and this is the U.S. Department of Education's definers, so we have to live with those definers. They define homeschool, non-accredited school as non-graduate.
Vanessa, you looked like you had a question a minute ago.
I did, and it has to do with, I know our goal is 100% because we want every child to graduate from high school. It used to be that like I'm having like 90% like stuck in my head. Was that the No Child Left Behind requirement, or the state used to have that guideline? Do we have any guidelines or parameters, or like this
Yes.
is the minimum? Thank
Yes.
you.
So during the No Child Left Behind days, it was actually 75% for graduation rate. It's 90, remember it was like 95% participation rate, and then by 2014, 100% proficient, and we were awesome. For current times, the state has set 80% as the graduation rate. So the goal is any subgroup that is 30 or greater, which makes it reportable, must make an 80% graduation rate in a 4-year cohort, or if they don't, they go to, and I don't want to glaze you over here, but they go to a 5-year cohort to bring in students who took longer to graduate and try to improve your numbers. So if they don't make it in the 4-year cohort, they apply a 5-year cohort to the data set. This is the last year we'll be allowed to use the 5-year cohort. The other thing is, in the ESSA plan, the Every Student Succeeds Act, federal legislation, the state in their plan put in 95% graduation rate by the year 2030. Okay? That plan has not yet been approved at the Federal Department of Education. So that's why we can only talk about it is that's what was written in the plan, but it has not yet been approved and said that's what the U.S. Department will approve. But the goal, their lofty goal, is 95% by 2030. So that's a couple of years away.
Do you know, giving districts the option of using a 5-year cohort plan, does that encourage counselors or other staff to actually reach out? I mean, are there benefits to giving us an extra year to attempt to reach those students and get them to successfully graduate, or has that not been traditionally helpful?
Traditionally, the 5-year rate usually is better because of what you just said. But again, rules from the U.S. Department of Ed and State Department, this is the last year we'll be allowed to use that metric.
Thanks.
So, Terry,
Yes.
you're maybe going to get to this, but so the whole thing about graduation rate, as the federal government defines it, makes me crazy because it's not really getting at the question that I think I care about the most, which is, of the kids that are our kids, how many of them are we not getting to cross the finish line for reasons that are not record-keeping reasons, right? Because if the kid moves out of our district and we can't figure out where they went, I don't see that as a fail on our part, or an area for us to work on, except for maybe our record keeping. But that's so. Do we have a sense of, what is that percentage of kids looking like that we just aren't getting across the finish line, even though we've had them and we had our chance and we just can't get them there? And I think, and I don't know if that's addressed in this or if it's a discussion for another day, but that's
what's the takeaway, right?
right. Exactly. Like, I mean, I get that we have to calculate it the way we have to calculate it because that's what the Department of Ed tells us we have to do, but the way that they calculate it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me if the point is that we're trying to improve academic achievement for those kids that we actually have in our buildings. And the
question would be,
don't make me do
how many
answer that
students
question.
are actually using the discontinued schooling? Is that more what
Yeah.
as compared to any other reason
Right,
that
exactly.
they're leaving? You guys want to? Yeah.
I can talk about Lawrence High because I think that's the next slide.
Yes, it is.
So when you get to my cohort, what you're going to find out, and here's a breakdown of my non-graduates by their coding group, okay? So unknown, so those would be students that we don't know where they went. I would have 17 unknowns in that group. Unknown students typically are living in a group home, and they transferred someplace else, and the system lost them. I think if you've read the papers, there's been some issues with tracking through the state system. Or those students left state and didn't re-enroll any place and contact us about. So those are just 17 kids where they left Lawrence High School. They didn't sign out, do the formal sign-out process. We have no idea where they went. 10 students left us to pursue a GED. We had one student transfer to homeschool and 2 transferred to non-accredited institutions. And and then I had 16 students drop out. So that accounts for everybody. So to the direct answer to your question,
Yes.
Shannon, 16.
Yes, okay, thank you very much.
So I
Sorry.
think that's an important
Matt,
distinction.
16 out of how many? Maybe it's in here.
It's yeah, I'm coming up.
To-
379.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
379. So now switching gears a little bit, so Matt's already kind of portrayed this, but here is the graduation rate for Lawrence High School across the 4 years. And again, remember that we've included JDC students in their mix. Why didn't I pull them out? Because I have to go in and figure out who they were one by one to do that, because they just are in the data set now.
And just to clarify with the JDC students, they're at our facility here, but they didn't necessarily ever attend school in Lawrence Public Schools before they were at They may have, but they may not have. Okay.
Right.
If they graduate through the day school program, though, their diploma has either Free State or Lawrence High on it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And do they have the option of walking with?
No.
Do they walk with the
At graduation.
school? They don't walk. They don't walk at all.
They have their own. The adult
They-
ed.
They typically have, if they're students who have never been enrolled in one of our.
Microphone.
Oh, sure, sorry. If they're students who have never been enrolled in one of our high schools, they typically, they wouldn't be part of our group that would walk. If the student desires, we had ceremonies out at the day school or at JDC for them, and it was pretty cool and pretty fun and highlighted their experiences and their successes that way.
And sometimes they finish at the day school and are reintegrated into the high school.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sometimes they transition back. There have also been, I think we had one person take advantage of this. We had a diploma completion and GED graduation as well, and we've also invited some of them to participate there. I think one person took us up on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is LHS's racial and ethnic subgroups across those 5 years. And then this is the set of numbers from 2017. I included gender because we had done it last year, and so I know that we could debate whether we really want to look at it that way, but it is reported. It's not a reportable subgroup specifically, but it is included in the state report card for schools. So it's something that you can see and be aware of. And again, any group that's less than 30 would not be reportable. So you'll notice that there are several up there that are not. This is Free State, and keeping with our data rules, I did not put any number up there of when a student group fell below 10. Okay, so but we are reporting down to 10 because it gives you guys a more accurate depiction of our data than if I just said 30 and then just put lots of asterisks. And so again, you can see the total in cohort for 2017 was 463, and then 408 graduated. And here are the racial and ethnic subgroups for Free State. And then the numbers for Free State for 2010. And again, you'll see several that are below 30. Okay. So now, this is the Lawrence Virtual School, and you'll notice again, the blank data elements would represent fewer than 10 students in that category. So that's why those are blank. And the numbers in 2014 were much smaller than currently.
Keith is here tonight because I think there just needs to be a little bit of background about the type of students that come to the virtual school and why that graduation rate looks very different from our brick and mortar schools.
And I think, Keith, if you can answer the same question that I asked Matt, if you have a sense of which ones are true dropouts versus kids that are just doing things that record-keeping wise we're not able to keep up with.
Yes, ma'am. Shannon, first of all, thank you for your earlier comment, because this process is as if we're taking a ruler to measure our weight. It simply doesn't match with what we really are doing. The students that come to our virtual school, about half of them see the world different, and the world sees them very different. These are kids that are dealing with medical issues, social issues, bullying issues, you name it, they're facing it. And they see the world differently, and the world sees them differently. These are some families that have been traditionally homeschooled for a length of time, forego that for a year or two, and come to us. Specifically to the question, similar to what you did with Matt, the 2017 cohort group of the Lawrence Virtual School is 142 kiddos. In other words, 142 kiddos have been with us. And as Dr. McEwen mentioned, the cohort group is adjusted year over year. But 142 kids in our cohort group, 78 of those students graduated from the Lawrence Virtual School. That does not make the rest of them non-graduates. 78 graduated from the Lawrence Virtual School. Of that 2017 cohort group, 14 students returned to homeschool, and they graduated from homeschool. And the state recognizes homeschooling, but they will not recognize it as a legitimate graduation. So it's recognized, but not recognized. Again, the ruler being used to measure our weight. 11 of those students went and got their GED. Again, in the eyes of the state, non-graduates, many of those kids went to higher education. 9 of the students went to a private or parochial school. Again, they graduated from a private or parochial school, but in the eyes of the state, that was not a legitimate graduation. We are a transient community in the virtual school. Kiddos and families will come to us for a year or two, and that is it. However, within that 2017 cohort group, we, as did Matt, had 13 kiddos that we couldn't find. We couldn't find them at all. We tried to track them down. I mean, we spent time on Facebook trying to find kiddos and families just to appease the state's documentation process. Of that 2017 cohort group, the 142 kids, 9 of them were with us for less than a semester. So the notion that the Lawrence Virtual School is accountable for their success/failure is to be questioned. Of that 2017 cohort group of 142 kids, 6 of them were with us for less than a year. Of the 2017 cohort group, 17 of them were with us for more than a year. And to Shannon's final question, 17 kiddos made up 12%. So 12% of our kids that we served for an extended period of time did not graduate, which in our eyes makes our graduation rate at 88% if we use a scale to measure our weight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just to keep it fair, this is the exact numbers. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Questions, comments?
I think that's a good analogy that you
Right.
used.
Myron, we don't want to leave you out. If you wanted to tell us your number, you can come up and tell us. I wasn't intending to not ask you the question as well.
I don't have the exact numbers like they have. We did, one of the first things that I would say, though, when I arrived 2.5 years ago, the first thing that hit my desk there was the class of 2017, because we knew there was a large group that would not graduate. So we made extensive efforts throughout the year working with students and trying to get them. And we really focused in the group that I do know those was our students with disabilities group, because that was a low, I think there was only like 64 or 65% of that group that graduated. So we tracked those, and of those 19 students, there were 3 we had no idea where they ended up. We had 8 that went to a GED program, so we do know that. We had 8 of those students who came to us as juniors with 2 credits. So when they come into the system like that, you know, with 2 credits as a junior in high school, you're way behind the 8 ball. So we really worked hard with this group of students. We knew that it was going to be a challenge, and we knew that we were going to take a dip in this year, 2017, just because of the students. That was kind of a unique class because it had a really high end of students, but then it also had a very challenging group of students on the low end. So I think our numbers would be the same. We would find that we had a group that went to homeschool. We have a group that went to GED. We also lost some students. So.
Thank you for that context. I appreciate it. That's this discussion. There's a lot more nuance to understanding these numbers than I think typically gets kind of talked about when people talk about graduation rates. So I appreciate the insight. Any other questions? All right. That is our last item then, and so I'm going to let our board members who are leaving us make the motion second to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.